Feeling sick when you're in a foreign country can be pretty scary. So today, we're going to build your toolkit of essential German vocabulary. This is all about helping you handle any health situation with way more confidence. So let's dive right in.
Okay, just picture it. You wake up one morning in Germany and you just feel off. What did he even say? How do you start that conversation? It's such a basic question, right? But by the end of this, you're going to have all the answers you need.
So we're going to follow what I like to call the patient's journey. It's a really logical path. We'll start with just the basics of feeling unwell. Then we'll get more specific about symptoms. After that, we'll figure out who to see and where to go, walk through what a doctor's appointment actually looks like, and finally, talk about treatment and getting you back on your feet.
All right, first up, Section 1, the absolute basics. Think of this as your foundation, the most important words you need to describe how you're generally feeling, good or bad.
So, let's start with the core opposites. On the one hand, you've got gesund, which means healthy, and fit, which is pretty self-explanatory. And on the other side, you have krank, meaning sick, and blass, which means pale. That's a super common way in German to say someone looks unwell.
So how do you put these into action? Well, here are two phrases you absolutely need to know. You can say, mir geht es schlecht, which literally means something like, for me, it's going badly. Or, even more directly, ich fühle mich krank, I feel sick. Both of these are perfect and get your point across right away. Okay, now we're moving on to Section 2, naming your symptoms. Because, saying you're sick is a great start, but being able to describe exactly what's wrong, that's the real key to getting the help you actually need.
So, the most common thing you'll probably feel is pain, or der Schmerz. But the word you'll probably use a lot more is the verb wehtun, which means to hurt. It's a handy one. You just say what's hurting, like mein Kopf tut weh, for my head hurts, or mein Hals tut weh, for a sore throat. It's incredibly useful.
And next up, a really important one, das Fieber, the fever. If you tell a doctor, ich habe Fieber, I have a fever, they're going to know immediately that it's something to take seriously.
All right, now for two words that can get a little confusing for learners. First, we have die Erkältung. This is your everyday, standard, common cold. Sniffles, maybe a little cough, nothing too dramatic.
But then we have die Grippe, and this is the flu. It's much, much more serious. It often comes with that Fieber we just talked about and just leaves you feeling totally wiped out. So remember, Erkältung is the cold, Grippe is the flu. Big difference.
So let's quickly break down the symptoms for that common cold, that Erkältung. You'll probably have der Schnupfen, which is a runny nose, and der Husten, a cough. And here's a cool little tip. Notice how the noun, der Husten, is almost exactly the same as the verb husten, which means to cough. Makes it easy to remember.
But what if you're not sick, but you've actually hurt yourself? Well, the word for that is die Verletzung, an injury. And the verb is reflexive, sich verletzen. So you'd say something like, ich habe mich verletzt, which means I have injured myself.
Okay, so you know how you feel and you know how to describe your symptoms. That's great. Let's move on to Section 3, people, places, and emergencies. Basically, where do you actually go to get help?
First things first, you need a doctor. The general word is der Arzt for a male doctor or die Ärztin for a female doctor. Your first stop is almost always der Hausarzt, which is your family doctor or general practitioner. And then for more specific things, you have der Zahnarzt for your teeth and der Augenarzt for your eyes. And you'll find these doctors in die Arztpraxis, which is the doctor's office. For anything more serious, you'll need das Krankenhaus, the hospital. And to get medicine, you'll head to die Apotheke, the pharmacy. Here's a little pro tip. Keep an eye out for a big, red, Gothic-looking A on the sign. That's how you spot a pharmacy. And don't be surprised if even basic stuff is kept behind the counter. You often have to ask the pharmacist for it.
Now, this is really important, especially for serious situations. An emergency is called der Notfall. And in a notfall, you go straight to die Notaufnahme, the emergency room. Seriously, if you only memorize 2 words for an emergency, make it these 2.
And that brings us right to Section 4, the doctor's appointment. So you know who to see and where to go, but what's the whole process actually like?
It's a pretty straightforward 4-step process. First, you have to einen Termin vereinbaren. That's making an appointment. Simple enough. Then, zum Arzt gehen. You go to the doctor. While you're there, you'll have die Untersuchung, the examination. And if you need it, you might ein Rezept bekommen, get a prescription. And that prescription leads us perfectly into our final section, number 5, treatment and recovery. This is your toolkit for that last and most important part of the journey, getting better. So, das Medikament is just the general word for medicine, and it can come in all sorts of forms. You might get die Tablette, which is a pill or tablet, die Tropfen, which are drops, die Salbe, an ointment for your skin, or for a small cut, you'll need das Pflaster, which you'd probably call a Band-Aid.
And look at this. This is where it all comes together. The doctor will verschreiben, that's prescribe, a Rezept, or prescription. You then take that Rezept to the Apotheke, the pharmacy, to get your Medikament. See? It all connects.
And one last but incredibly important practical tip. Honestly, none of this works without your Versicherungskarte. That's your insurance card. You get it from your Krankenkasse, your health insurance company. You absolutely must have this with you every single time you see a doctor.
You know, after all that medical talk, there's one really nice phrase you'll hear all the time, and you'll probably want to use it yourself. It's simple, it's warm, it's perfect. Gute Besserung. It just means get well soon.
So there you have it. From feeling crank all the way to hearing Gute Besserung, you now have a really solid vocabulary toolkit for this whole patient's journey in Germany. The big takeaway here is that with just these key words, you really are empowered to take care of yourself. Which leaves me with just one last question for you. What other practical situations would you love a guide for?